you want to look at the whole game or like start specifically with the end game?
Let's start at the end game.
Okay, so here, I think you said that you wanted to push the pawn.
Yes.
Was that here? Okay, so actually, this would not have been as effective as I think you're giving it credit for, because
he checks me upon moving.
Right, and that's what you were referencing. And the problem is this pawn is now a liability. It looks intimidating, but your king is now tied down to it. So in the end game, you want to be very careful about pushing your pawns and making moves that look intimidating, because weaknesses are permanent, basically. There's nothing to defend them with. And so after king e5, he can also trade a pair of rooks, and that lessens the load on his king.
And this is also like a less good spot for me.
Yes, and king
whatever it was I did earlier, like, got my rooks into a better spot once the trade was made.
Right, exactly. And actually, your move king e6 was fine. And now he walked right into this check. And this was the critical position that I wanted to unpack. Now, if you look at his king, this move you thought was checkmate, is not checkmate because his rook contests the square. But
yes,
what can you notice about all of the squares on the 4th rank? If you put a rook on any of the squares on the 4th rank other than d4, what is that? What happens?
It's a free rook.
And checkmate.
Oh, and checkmate?
Right, and checkmate. So imagine you go rook b8, for example. He makes an empty move, you go rook b4 check. This is mate in 2.
Oh, you're right, because boom, boom.
Not with a pawn, though. You take with a rook.
Oh, you're right.
You take with a rook, and it's checkmate.
Every single...
So
I see. Okay.
So, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I was just confirming what you were saying earlier. Every single non-d4 move on the 4th rank is checkmate.
Exactly. And now we have sort of a detective task. You need to move the rook. You need to maneuver the rook to one of these squares. The problem is, it's not as easy as it seems, because if you play rook b8, right, could you find a way for white to then put this square under control? There's actually 2 ways of doing that.
Yeah, pawn and rook.
Exactly, a3, rook ab1. So each one of the squares has a problem associated with it, and you need to find the best, relatively best square to maneuver the rook to. So does anything come to mind?
The one with my existing rook.
Yes, the one on d8 has to reach one of the squares in the 4th rank. The question is, which of the squares is the best one to try to reach, if that makes sense?
Wait. Isn't it just going to be rook, rook?
So that almost works. I thought this was winning, but white has a crazy defense here. White can go rook d3 and pave the way for the king to go back to e3. And I did not see that for a long time. So I think the best move is probably rook to f8. The idea being, if white does the same thing, then you can transform the advantage. You can, well, if you move the rook up, then it's the same problem. I move the king back, and it's not mate. Right. But you can just take the rook. This is similar to what happened in the game, actually. And then you take the pawn and you start mowing down all of his pawns.
I see.
So that was, I think, the best move in this position. You gave him a check, which let him off the hook a little bit. He walked right into all of the remaining checks. He should have gone back, probably. And
wait, where did he end up going?
He ended up going here, and then he ended up going here. So in this position, he should have probably gone...
just e3.
Probably, although here you give him another check, and now he can go to d2 and attack your rook, and then he can use the tempo to save his pawn. So, sorry, those arrows are all wrong. I'm terrible at drawing arrows. There we go. Does that make sense? You have to move your rook, then he goes f3, and, you know, the position's very complicated. You're down a pawn, but you're attacking his king.
Yeah, that definitely... I definitely felt like he screwed up when he went f3.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But yes, that makes sense to me.
And then the last thing is, the resulting endgame is actually not as easy as it appears, because there is this, like, it's very lame, but there was this Russian master, I think, that many years ago coined the phrase, all rook endgames are drawn. I think it was actually a German player from the 19th century.
Wait, really?
All rook endgames are drawn. That's like the aphorism. And what the hell does that mean? Well, if you look into rook endgames very deeply, you'll find that even positions that look completely winning have these crazy drawing resources, because the rook can combine its power to give the king checks in an open board with its power to support a passed pawn. And it's just very hard to convert these endgames. So his best way of defending this was probably, and don't quote me on this, but he probably should have started pushing his own pawn as quickly as possible. So something like this.
Can we see what the evaluation is?
Absolutely. I've turned on. It is.
Is it
yeah,
0?
it's not going to be 0 because black is the one who holds the defensive chances. It's minus 1.5, which is, as I said, somewhere in the gray zone between a win and a draw. So even this stockfish on chess.com, which is pretty weak, it's only reaching a depth of 15, is not sure whether it's a win or a draw. I think it actually might be a draw with best play.
With perfect play.
Yes, but playing this perfectly with white is virtually impossible. That's the other side of the coin. You're not playing computers. You're playing somebody, and white has so many different moves here. It's impossible, given the constraints of a blitz game or rapid game, to you can't sit and calculate this out for 3 hours. When do I push the H pawn? When do I give a check? It's impossible.
Oh.
So that's sort of the rundown here. But you played this perfectly. You brought your king to the right spot. You sheltered it with a rook. And the only thing I would nitpick here, and actually this might still be a move that allows him to draw. This move allows him to draw the game. Believe it or not. And I'm going to...
Don't I have to protect the pawn?
So actually you can. But you can do that while taking his. And maybe... Now you'll see the idea. If he takes your pawn here, what do you have?
Oh, then... Yeah, I see.
You have...
It's a huge blunder on his part.
Yeah, but the thing is, if he...
And only 4 pieces, it's still so complicated.
Exactly. Endgames are incredibly tactical. And the thing is, you might go, big deal, why do I need to worry about this pawn? Well, let me show you. Once he got rook b4 and king b2, what his strategy should have basically been to give up his rook at the right moment for your pawn, and then use his king and the pawn to basically force you to then give your rook up for the pawn. So what does that look like? He starts with the move king f5. His idea is to approach g5 in order to pave the way for the pawn to start moving. Okay? So
once he connects with the pawn, I can't break it very easily.
Exactly. You push your own pawn, and you're faster, yes. But look at this position. Your king is in freaking Timbuktu right now, and he's pushing his own pawn. The rook itself is not capable of stopping the pawn. It can only give itself up for the pawn. So you can block it like this, but the kings, you can start checking, and we're going to have a repetition. But eventually, you're either going to have a repetition or you're going to have to give up the rook for the pawn.
Wait, that's sick. I never even considered that, like, he can force a draw like that.
There are beautiful puzzles in moments from games that feature this dynamic. So king and pawns against the rook. It's a whole category of theoretical and practical endgames that you have to kind of study to master the endgame.
There's no way for a rook to separate... Oh, I see, yeah. As long as they stay, like, one square next to each other, you cannot separate them and take the pawn.
So yeah.
You must get your king involved, and because I'm too far away, it's a guaranteed draw. With perfect play.
Yes, and there's when the king is a little bit closer, you start getting absolutely beautiful tactics that are associated with this. For example, a very famous one, and I'm going to artificially construct it out of this position. So this is not actually what's happening. I could set up the position, but I'm just kind of setting it up manually.
Okay.
Okay. So this position with black to move is... It looks like a draw because it looks like the king is shouldering off black's king, right? And you're just going to push this pawn to queen. But in reality, it is winning for black, and this is an incredible concept when you see it for the first time. How is it winning for black? Well, you start by giving a check. White's king pushes itself up to g7, intending to play h7 and h8. Okay, yeah. Black goes king g5. And it looks like this is a lost cause because after h7, the king is clearly not fast enough. But after rook a7, check king g8, I'd actually like you to find black's move in this position. Yep. Now, it's not the end of the story. If I queen, you obviously...
Checkmate.
Checkmate. But white has something very clever that he can do in this position. Could you find it?
Another move?
Yes, white can do something here to stave off defeat, but as we'll talk about, only for one move.
This is the only, like, go right and you lose the pawn. Checkmate.
Correct. Go left and you lose the pawn.
Go left, lose the pawn anyway.
Or get checkmated. Checkmate. Are you sure about that? If you move pawn, you can make something other than a queen, though.
Oh my god.
Yes, exactly. You can make a knight.
Whoa!
But, Now, king and knight against king and rook in an open board is a draw. That is a theoretical draw. But in this specific position, this is an exception to the rule because black plays king f6. And because of the oh my god, I cannot say that word. Because of the specifics of the king and knight's placement, it's a loss. Because after king f8, rook a8, it's checkmate, and the knight is boxed in. It has no squares. So white is in Zugzwang.
Wow, that's insane.
And that's... Thank you, John Lyon, for this up. And that is one of literally tens of such theoretical positions that somebody who masters endgames has to know. Just to give you a taste of it.
I've searched all my life for an opportunity where promoting to knight is the correct move.
I actually love under promotion, so I look for these chances in all my games. I've recently had a string of games where I've actually under promoted to a knight, and that was the only way to proceed. Like the best one was like a bullet game I played against Magnus. Where I had to under promote to a knight to checkmate him. But it's very rare. It's very rare.
Okay.
But yeah, so I am completely at your service. We can take a look at the London. You can play more. Whatever kind of floats your boat, I'm totally fine doing.
Oh, okay. There's this style of practice I wanted to try.
Yeah.
I did this with Robert Hess earlier.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like it was kind of cool.
Mm-hmm.
I wanna play a regular match out.
Mm-hmm.
But as soon as you feel like the game is over due to like a blunder or something, we swap locations on the board, and then I want to see how you would come back from it.
Ooh, that's interesting. Okay, so we play among us, and then every time, so at the moment when I think you have blundered or you've given the game away, we switch colors.
Yes, and then I want to see how you come back from it.
Sounds great. I'm totally game for that. So do you want white or black? Do you want a specific opening or...
I'll play as the black pieces because I'm less experienced on it.
Okay, sounds good. And I'll probably play 1e4 because that's what you'll probably meet in the POC champs.
That's what I'm used to, and that's what I feel like almost everyone plays.
All right. And you see my moves. Okay, perfect. Okay.
Is there a way you can change your name at the top?
Unfortunately not. That's one of the features, yeah, you can't. I've run into that problem before.
That's fine.
We could technically do something where we play a real fake game, and then I invite you to an analysis board on that game, if that makes sense. But I guess it's not worth the trouble.
Yeah, this is fine. People who come in will just be like, damn, this is the best 1300 ELO player ever.
Exactly. Yeah, who's this Talmax guy? Okay, so I'm going to play the fried liver. Okay, impressive. You know the theory.
It's the only move I know. Oh, here I was never sure if bishop. Oh yeah. If bishop out or pawn out was the correct move.
It's pawn out. Because you want to play with tempo basically, and I couldn't even tell you.
This forces your hand, whereas the other one doesn't.
Yeah, I mean, the other one also does. I could actually not tell you straight off the bat why bishop covering is such a bad move. So it's not like it's terrible. The bishop to d7, it's not the main move, but I don't think it's terrible. I just think c6 is like the theory.
I see. Okay, and then pawn takes instead of knight takes, right?
Correct. Now, again, you want to play with tempo, push the bishop away. And
I see.
Now you have an initiative for the pawn. That's kind of the rationale behind this whole line.
Okay, but you still want a pawn from me.
Right, so you've sacrificed the pawn. Right, and actually this is one of those lines, Albert, where it's hard to see the compensation, because if you look at your pawn structure, it's kind of ruined. So you might be like, not only have I sacrificed the pawn, what the hell do I get from it? Look at my knight on a5 misplaced. The reality is, this knight on g5 is very vulnerable. My pieces are not developed. And I'll give you sort of one hint about playing this position. At the right moment, you want to push e4, potentially if my knight reaches f3. So you don't want to let me get air for my pieces.
Oh.
But I won't tell you what to do, obviously. I'll let you kind of play this out.
Oh, I see. So, like, the thing I should note right off the bat is, like, I have a sick discovered check on your knight. Discovered attack on your knight.
Yeah, exactly. Potentially. I mean, that's something to factor in. Maybe you can just chase the knight away. That's also something to consider.
Yeah, and your knight only has one good square, so I want to somehow cut this square off.
I like that thinking.
But the only way I can cut this square off is through moving the pawn up now.
Right.
But,
you're right to be skeptical. Now, do you want me to tell you sort of what the theory here is?
give me a sec to see if I can find it.
Sure.
So why is moving this pawn not good? I feel like there is a hard to find string that leads to an advantage for white.
Yeah, and it's not... Okay, I can show you. So if you go e4, which it's the reason this is perhaps less instructive for you is because it's a very logical move. There's nothing wrong with it from a conceptual point of view. You're depriving the knight of this square. You want to go h6, and that'll force the knight to reach this awkward square where you can pick it off by the bishop and ruin white's pawn structure. Logic is ironclad. The problem is this pawn is very weak. And in the time that you've given me, I can play the move d3. Not only do I potentially develop my bishop, but I undermine this pawn. And you just don't have time to play h6 because I'm going to take your pawn. So
I see.
That's the problem. You need to switch the order of these two moves. That's kind of the theoretical continuation.
I force it to the only good square, and then I attack it with tempo.
Bingo.
Oh. Okay, let's continue.
I'm not seeing... Sometimes it glitches where I stop seeing your moves. Did you already play h6?
Yes.
Oh, crap. Let me try to make it synchronize again.
Oh, it's there.
Try playing h6 again.
I just did. Uh-oh.
No, this is a very famous... Chess.com's analysis feature is... Okay, now you see h6?
No.
Play h6 again, because it keeps auto-syncing. It should eventually... I am going to give them so... I have already given them so much crap for this. Nothing ever changes. Knight f3.
I see it.
And I see you playing e4. I'm looking at your stream, and I see you playing e4. There we go. Perfect. Okay, and I'm going to start traveling on a world tour with my knight.
This is interesting. So, for me to punish this...
And full disclosure, this is where my own theoretical knowledge ends, because I don't play this line personally with either color. So I remember it up to this point. I can only generate sort of logical moves from this point on.
Yeah, it feels like it's not the greatest position for white to play if your opponent knows how to respond.
Oh yeah, definitely. That's why it's fried liver is. It's a very much risky opening.
I'm going to develop for castle and attack your knight at the same time.
Okay, reasonable. I'm going to go d4 to defend the knight and potentially pave open the diagonal for my bishop.
Let's sign. I'm kind of scared of being on the open, so now I do this. It didn't seem like you have any particular threats on me as of right now.
As will I. As will I.
Okay, so now I need to decide if I want to trade queens randomly. I want to say no. I feel like my queen has a little bit more potential than yours.
Yeah, and also you're a pawn down. So trades, unless you have a very good reason for them, are not to be... Yeah. It's not something that you want to necessarily go out of your way for, especially when you're down a pawn.
Oh, right. You still want a pawn from the initial attack.
Correct.
So, let me think. You win a pawn, but what do I get? I get all these like randomly developed pieces, and now I need to, and also open lines for my.
Perfect. Yeah, exactly.
Open line. So I need to figure out a way to synchronize my pieces together.
Yes, or to sort of, how do I phrase this, to undermine my own pieces before I finish my development. Because notice my own queen side. If I get my knight and my bishop out, your compensation and initiative is going to start to evaporate. So you need to operate here with a sense of particular urgency. You don't even have time to finish your own development. That's the hint I'm going to give you. You really need to act fast in terms of undermining my pieces.
Act fast in terms of undermining your pieces. So to prevent your pieces from going to the squares you want to go, I can't really cut this off.
You can't do that. Yeah, you need to like identify my most vulnerable piece here and work on undermining it. That's what I would do.
Say this move feels good.
It's... I'll let you choose a move and then I'll sort of critique it.
Okay. I'll just think out loud. So I know you want to get your bishop out somewhere. If I go here, I cut this option off, but you can still just go here, which seems totally fine for you. There must be a way for me to stop this bishop from providing value. I don't want to trade. No, I'm not looking to trade. I feel like there's something much better if I think hard enough about it. I see here that there's actually There's actually something kind of interesting. I'm gonna make this move.
Okay. That's interesting, actually. Quite interesting. And I am going to... I don't like the way this knight is placed, so I'm going to chase it away with my pawn.
Right, you can just... You can do that. I forgot about that.
Hey, chessmate. Yeah, so that's, you know... And I'm trying to explain the logic of my own. You can take anything back that you want to. I'm not sure how exactly you want it. Or we can... I wouldn't say you've made a blunder, but you've made what I would say is a pretty serious inaccuracy.
What if I do this?
Okay. Now you're giving me a choice of what piece to take. And I am going to take the bishop. I am going to take the bishop. Because your bishop was annoying me. And now I'm attacking your knight. And now you have to move the knight away.
Okay, no, I see it. This was overall not a good series of moves. Can we go back a few?
Absolutely. And we could also switch colors, like however you prefer to. So in this position, do you want me to walk you...
What was the move you were thinking of?
Yeah, so let me walk you through the logic. First of all, the move g5 that you were thinking about, in addition to not stopping me from developing on e3, as you correctly pointed out, do you see the drawback of a move like this conceptually?
Vulnerable king.
Yeah, so you're pushing pawns in front of your king, and you're giving me a hook. And I could use this hook in the future to play a move like f4. And this is very Monka-esque in terms of your king position. I mean,
yeah, when I take, I'm in, like, real trouble.
Deep yogurt. I mean, I'm going to take with my bishop. This is going to be... I mean, this is just... my 6th grade drama teacher used to say that. I've adopted that phrase. So, you're not stopping me from developing my pieces. What you need to work on is this knight on e5. That is the only piece that's sticking out like a sore thumb. It looks good, but that's like a spy, a Russian spy in America in the 60s, right? Like, as soon as you notice it, all of your forces can conspire against it. And so it is supported very thinly only by this pawn on t4, right?
Nothing else can support it? Oh,
well, right now it's only supported by this pawn on t4. So hypothetically, let's imagine a scenario where this pawn on t4 were gone. This knight would be without a base. Could you ensure that this pawn on t4 would be undermined?
Oh. So I go up here? That's the move?
That is the move.
Whoa.
That is the move. That is the move, and it's not winning. It's not that good, but it is the only way, I believe, to keep the initiative going. Because if I take your pawn, you're going to take the knight. If I continue with my development as if everything was fine, then you're going to take the pawn. I can take with the queen, but you can already tell how vulnerable this is all becoming, right?
Yeah.
Is this making sense so far?
It's a lot better for me now.
And what I would probably do in the situation is reinforce the pawn with c3. But, and this is what you wanted to achieve initially, and you achieved it indirectly, you have now deprived my knight of a key developing square. So, just by establishing this on the board, you have already achieved a lot, and in addition, you have cleared away the diagonal for the bishop, so you can develop your bishop here, and you no longer have the pawn on c6 obstructing that diagonal.
Whoa.
So,
whoa, what a high value move that was extremely not obvious.
Right, it's like a very multi-purpose move. So you do it for one reason, but you force your opponent into inducing these concessions in his position. If that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, I can understand like why this move is so great. And I'm trying to wrap my head around the line of thinking that you had that could bring you to find these moves.
Right, and I hope I've explained my logic clearly. It's not like I'm, pulling this move like out of a hat. It's just that I'm looking at the knight, and that's the only piece that I can fundamentally really access in this position, and I know that I need to act with a sense of urgency. So we start from these first principles. I need to act with a sense of urgency. If I let white develop these pieces, I am going to be in trouble. Therefore, I need to do something fast, and from that comes the next step in the chain of logic, which is that this knight is the only piece I can really go after.
So when you initially told me, like, okay, we have a sense of urgency, I don't want to let you develop these pieces. When you told me that, I was like, oh, that's too many constraints. It's not really possible. Let's just find like the next best move. But I feel like in this case there happened to be a move. But how would you know if such one exists? Like, I spent like 30 seconds looking for it. I was like, I can't find anything. Maybe it doesn't exist. And then I just like made whatever move felt good to me at the time.
Right, but I think it's because you were coming at it from the perspective of trying to stop me from developing my pieces, rather than from the perspective of identifying your opponent's most vulnerable or weakest piece. So I'm going to give you a tactical component to this and a conceptual component. Tactically, you always want to pay attention to undefended pieces. There's an acronym I could teach you that will help you do this, and that acronym is LPDO, or abbreviation, LPDO. And that stands for loose pieces drop off. And what I mean specifically by a loose piece is a piece that is not defended by any pawns. Okay, so a piece could be defended by another piece, and I still call it an undefended piece. Or a piece that's not defended by anything. So most tactics in chess, in some way, exploit undefended pieces.
Okay.
Now, fact one. Here, of course, this knight, is it an undefended piece by our definition?
It is not an undefended piece.
Right, but I'm trying to make it. I've identified a piece that I could potentially render undefended, and because that abbreviation is already circling in my mind, that justifies the move c5. I love basically removing the support behind these pieces. So it's really intuitive for me. I can't exactly tell you, okay, but how did you think of that in the first place? At some point, it boils down to the subconscious and practice. But I'm trying to sort of explain the fundamental logic behind a move like this.
Makes sense.
Okay. So c5, do you want to make this move and continue from this point?
Yeah.
So let me make... I'm not going to play c3. I'm going to play something a little bit more... I think that your opponents might do. Which is... let's say I go bishop to e3.
Oh, wait. In place of which move?
In place of c3. So c3 would be the best move, I'm pretty sure.
Okay.
And
but you're going to do something that might be more reasonable.
Yeah, I'm doing something that I would more likely expect, which is not the best, but something I'd more likely expect from one of your opponents. Who are you playing? Are you playing someone tomorrow? Just out of curiosity?
2 days.
Okay. And who is your next opponent?
Either Papa Platt or Swiftor. I'm no longer... I hope it doesn't come across as too cocky, but I'm pretty sure like I'll be fine for those matches. I'm mostly just like thinking about my match against Boy.
Right. No. That is definitely the match you need to be preparing against. All right. So bishop e3 and black to move here.
Look for checks, captures, and attacks. Okay.
Anything coming to mind?
I looked at a couple potential lines. None of them felt that great, but I know where I want to attack. I want to attack this rook.
This rook?
This area.
Okay, interesting.
I see this this pawn is hanging.
Yeah.
I see that if you move it, then there's an open diagonal.
Interesting. That's a good observation.
I'm thinking about how I can like get this.
Okay.
I want to pressure this diagonal and this pawn around the same time. I know that if I move my rook out, a player would just move the pawn up.
Right.
So I want to first establish the diagonal. That's what I'm thinking about winning right now.
Okay.
So now I'm thinking about if this piece, does this win that for me?
Well, not quite. I take with my bishop
really.
and the knight is supported. But now you should bear in mind that the knight is by our definition undefended. So the knight becomes a lot more vulnerable once it's lost its pawn base.
I have an idea.
Okay. Knight t5.
Yeah.
Very good move.
Let's play until I blunder and then swap sides.
Okay. And I'll just tell you that is a good move. That is perhaps not the move I would have played, but a good move. I'm going to go knight c3.
Okay, so I want this guy out.
All right.
Oh, but I see. Because you recapture with a pawn, I still can't really break this chain.
Right. This is unfortunately quite robust. this pawn chain. Which, it doesn't mean you're lost or you're in serious trouble, but it's just that you have to reorient sort of yourself onto different set of priorities in this position.
Yeah. I'm thinking.
Okay. So I will now, I will ask myself, what new weak squares does a pawn move create? Well, it does create one square into which I can then put my knight.
Oh, I was thinking of this one. Oh, I guess not yet. Right.
Oh, sorry. So what was that?
I didn't even think about this area. I was thinking of something like that.
Right, and I was too, actually, and I'm not ruling that out. If you move your knight away from a5, I might very well give you a check on c4. But you were also attacking my knight, so... Now, while you haven't blundered, I would say you're much worse here. But you can still keep... We can play for a couple more moves before we switch sides.
I have an idea.
Yeah. Well, I'm looking at all of the undefended pieces, and I notice the pawn on e4 is undefended, so I can capture it. Whoa, Gotham with a party rate of 1,077. Holy smokes. Thank you, Levy. Welcome, guys.
Okay. I'm thinking about this move right here.
F5. Okay, so you're attacking my knight. I am going to take the bishop. Now the queen is attacking my knight. I'm going to move it out to a nice outpost. Again, a square where it's defended by a pawn. Back to its home base.
Okay, and whenever I want to attack, I need to remember to attack the squares that are, like, I have to attack the beginning of the chain.
Yes, that is a good rule to keep in mind. The problem is you're not really reaching that beginning.
Yeah, this is, I'm thinking, like, this is a great square for my knight to be if it could somehow get there safely.
Oh, absolutely, and then you would win the rook.
Not here. Or, what about this?
Okay,
I dropped
so...
No,
that is a blunder, yeah. But you can play this move and we can switch sides. But I am also attacking your rook.
Wait. Can't I attack the weak point of your chain now?
How exactly?
Boom.
Well, yeah, that would be the best move. Rook e7? You mean rook e7?
Yeah.
Right, so that is the best move in the position. Oh, did you play it already? Oh yeah, I just don't see them. It's not transmitting. God, I don't know why it just stops. Okay. Let's see. Do you see me playing it?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, cool. So basically, the reason you're not technically attacking the pawn is because, well, my knight is in front of the rook and the knight is supported. And that when I tell you how important undefended pieces are, this is exactly why. It's going to be very hard for you now to dislodge the knight. And if you don't dislodge the knight, you're going to, by extension, find it very hard to attack the base of the pawn chain. So
oh, my knight can't really ever go here. You can always just trade it, even if it was protected.
Right, and you can't really protect that square you're pointing out with a pawn. So it's maybe in the future you'll be able to get your knight here, or you'll be able to get your knight here and trade off the knights, and then your rook is going to start attacking the base of the pawn chain. But you also, and I talked about this a lot with Charlie, who's a lot weaker than you, but I think it applies all the way up to GM level. The concept of tunnel vision. In tunnel vision,
I do that. I hella do that.
Yeah, but it refers to a lot of different things. It's obviously an intuitive concept, but it also refers to you come up with a plan, and then you achieve this plan at all costs, and you fail to realize how, even if you have finally achieved your plan and the crowning moment comes, you've cut the red tape, the ribbon-cutting ceremony has occurred, but then you realize you've blundered something. So let me give you an example. I'm going to make the move c3. I'm going to make the move c3. And I have actually given you an opportunity here to trade off the knights and achieve your childhood goal of attacking the base of this pawn chain. Now, we can keep playing this. I don't want to force you into doing it my way, but obviously that move is going to be a trap. That's what I'm trying to show you. Thank you, Priam, for the sub. But we'll talk about it in a moment. I'll let you. Yeah. So this is the move. I'm going to take the knight. Bingo. Now you've succeeded. Congratulations. You are attacking e3 finally. You've gotten rid of the knight, but do you notice the position of the queen and the rook that I've highlighted?
Oh, you fork.
Pin. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Pin the queen to the rook. I win an exchange. Or an entire rook, depending on what you do. And that is the epitome of tunnel vision. Where you are only focused on your successes and you fail to understand how the position has changed as a consequence of what you've accomplished.
Yeah.
So
I didn't like adapt to the evolving board state.
Yes, and that is one of the hardest things to do in chess. Detecting small changes in the position, because this is not a thing that occurs here. It's just that the queen has moved from d6 to c6, and all of a sudden this manifests itself. That's a very hard thing to pick up on. And that's just, it happens at my level. I do this all the time too, just at different levels of complexity, perhaps. So with that in mind, I'll shut up, and let you play here. And I actually need to run to the bathroom, so you have 1 more minute to think about this. I'll be right back.
Wait, did my move appear on his screen? Oh, my move did not appear on his screen. Let me try making it again. Oh, weird. I'm moving my bishop, but he doesn't see it. Can you not see this? You can't see my bishop running around? Eh? I'm just moving pieces around. I'm gonna see if they appear on his board. Can you see these pieces moving? You can't see the pieces moving. How do we get them synced up again? Where were we? We were right here.
I'm back. Whenever you're ready.
I made my board, but it's not appearing on your board.
Yeah. Let's see. I am giving them a stern talking to after our session is over. So try again. What did I do here? I played c3. So try to make a move here. Okay, I see you playing bishop a6 on your stream. Amazing, it's not appearing. Okay, so bishop a6. I've made it manually on my stream. That is a good move. So you're trying to trade off your bishops. Was that the rationale?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, good. I'm going to take it.
I take back.
Yep. Yeah, I see it. And now I'm going to just do a quick search for hanging pieces and pawns. And I do identify a hanging pawn, which I'm going to capture.
I feel like knight... Oh. Okay. I feel like this is a bad move, but it looks really juicy to me, and I want you to tell me why it's bad.
Okay.
I want to take knight on.
Let me ask you another question. So why do you think it's good?
I'm looking at getting my knight. Can you see my arrows?
Yeah, I can. Knight to c4. Okay, but you realize that you're sacrificing something, right?
Yeah, I'm losing a little bit of a lot.
So an exchange, and you're familiar with the concept of an exchange. That means just rook for bishop or knight, right?
Yes.
That is actually, you know, that's like making it a $50,000 investment into something. Like it's not insurmountable, but it's worth about 2 pawns. So basically, and I don't like reasoning like that, you've sacrificed the equivalent of 2 pawns, which is not insignificant. And let me explain why it's. What if you do? I see you've played rook. You've doubled rooks. Mm-hmm. So first of all, let me explain why this is not as good. Now, a good test of whether an idea that you think is tempting is actually good is the Okay, there's two. Sorry to talk so much. Let me just lay this out really quickly. It's the best case scenario test and the worst case scenario test. First, you ask yourself, if my opponent allows me to accomplish my greatest childhood dreams, and in your case, that's putting your knight on c4.
Yes, that's all I want.
What specifically, and I mean specifically, have you accomplished with this move? What is going on here in this situation?
I got a pawn and I attack your queen, and if your rook was here, I would have attacked it too.
Okay, so you're let's break that down. You're attacking. You said you got a pawn?
Mm-hmm.
Which pawn?
This one.
Okay, but that's only if the rook no longer makes contact. So I can take your pawn with my rook. Mm-hmm. And you've taken your pawn with my knight. Big deal. Okay, we've traded pawns. You've sacrificed an exchange, and all you have to show for it is a knight that looks fancy. But what can you tell me about this knight? Which property does it suffer from that we've talked about?
It's loose.
It's loose. Do you see any other loose pieces other than the queen? That doesn't count? Well, I guess it does, but any other loose pieces?
Oh, I see. My rook.
Bingo.
There is a position your queen can go to.
Yes,
both of these.
exactly. That is a fork. Now, there is a position your rook get to defend both, but because the knight is unprotected, I can just keep attacking the knight until you lose it. So,
and for the most part, there's nothing I can do here.
You can try to defend it again with your queen, but I will attack it again with my rook, and I will eventually vacuum up all of your pieces.
I see. Okay.
So,
I will go back.
Basically, once you break down what it is exactly you accomplish, doing all of this just for a pawn is not a worthy price to pay for the exchange sacrifice. So that's sort of what I call the best. And sometimes the best case scenario test can kind of sober you up a little bit. You realize that what you wanted to do is actually not that impressive. Now, you suggested doubling the rooks. Mm-hmm. Okay, now do you again want to... Let me make an empty move here. Let me go h3, just for giggles.
Mm-hmm. Now I want to move my knight here.
Okay, so you want to go knight c4 and trade off the knights. That's much better. Unfortunately, there is a tactic here that I could use to win some material. Conceptually, your idea is perfect. Now, let me explain what it is. The knight is undefended. Again, I've told you all evil comes from undefended pieces. And you have an exposed king. So you have two properties of the position. Undefended knight, exposed king. Can you find a move for white here that exploits both of them? Yes, but you can do the same thing in one move. You can pin the knight in one move. Because if you... Yeah, exactly. Yeah, bingo. Queen b3, you win the knight, or you win the exchange. Black has to give up his rook, and you take it even. With a rook, that's a good idea to trade more pieces off. And because of the pin, black is busted. So another move, by the way, here is even queen e2. And now the queen is undefended. So you see, everything stems from undefended pieces. And again, I will either win the knight, or I will win the queen, or I will win the exchange. So that's sort of the fundamental reason that these undefended pieces are so important, especially when you have an exposed king in the mix. That's like fork and pin central. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, that's insane. That's so much to keep track of.
Yeah.
In what looked like a pretty simple game.